started. Oh, there goes my alarm clock telling me it's 9 o'clock. Welcome, everybody. I first want to say thank you again to Mark, who acts as my co-chair, co-anchor, technical guru support, and who puts everything up on the website. We've got a lot of compliments on that. One question was, Mark, you're combining all of those. Can you name the session separately on Facebook? My response was, if you're finding them on Facebook and it takes you to the link, that's good enough for me because there's lots of material there. But I've just passed that on. Had a lot of comments about the session last week, some good, some bad. A lot of it was, I think a lot of got misinterpreted. Last week's session was about understanding what a name was about. It wasn't about moving dancers or controlling formations, but that's fine because it leads to a lot of other issues and a lot of other questions that people have. So as I said, although we sort of got digressed in a lot of areas last week, I do encourage interaction because that's what these activities are all about. It's not a stagnant lecture, although there is a bit of a formal presentation. It's not a stagnant lecture to say, this is it, this is everything, because how I do it may be different than how Brian does it, how Guido does it, how Masako does it, everything else, and everybody's own way works for them, and that's great. I was discussing this with Brian at the beginning, and when we were talking Fazar, we got a little sidetracked, and I wish I had thought about this then, but the reality is, if you want to describe a Fazar state, I wish I had thought of this. Picture in your minds this kind of a setup. From a static square, heads right and left through, heads past the ocean, facing dancers, pass through, and the boys in the center hinge. What's that Fazar state called? And the answer is, who cares? The correct Fazar terminology for that is heads right and left through, heads past the ocean, facing dancers, pass through, center boys hinge. Because that tells you where everybody is. Everybody can visualize where everybody is, and that's all it is a place to start discussions. It's Fazar description is not about moving dancers or moving formations. It's just about having a way to communicate where you are, and how you do that is what's important. So let's put last week aside. I still want to stress to everybody, I encourage your communication. Today we're going to be talking about programming, and programming is one of those things that is probably one of the most important parts of calling. Every single caller does it, whether or not they know they're doing it or not. It's something that happens with all of us.
I prefer C++.
Sorry? C++. Yeah. I think that comes after C4 though, doesn't it?
Well, there's also C#, but C++ is where I prefer. Yeah.
I see.
Anyway, I like senile.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting there too. The idea for this presentation, however, is basically, okay, let's take a step back. We've had, I think, 8 different sessions on programming where we looked at things in great detail. But what we wanted to look at in this session was just a step back and a basic overview of programming. So what we're looking at here is a very basic understanding of programming and how it applies to new callers, but also how it applies to mentors when they're talking to new callers. So we're going to break it down a little bit. And there's 4 basic parts to programming, and they apply to every single stage. And you've heard this over and over and over. That's plan, prepare, practice, and perform. The performance is part of the program. And there are many ways to program, but the principle remains the same, and so does the consequence. And that consequence is, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Doesn't have to be a real detailed plan, but you should have something in mind every time you go up on stage. So here's you as the caller. You've done all your preparation and programming. You've got everything that you want to do, and this is your objective. And if you keep that in mind, your objective is the happy dancers on top of the podium saying, yes, we win. These are all the little steps you take along the way. So first, for a new caller, being asked to perform a tip is an honor. Remember that. Regardless of what level of calling experience you have, it's because it shows the person that is asking you to call a tip has respect, and has confidence in your ability to move dancers and present an enjoyable performance for those dancers. He or she knows that the dancers are very tolerant, they're very forgiving, and is not worried about if you get them home or if it's fancy or clever, just looking for you to give a good, solid, danceable performance that the dancers enjoy and that you show that you're getting better, because the dancers will appreciate that. For new callers, your focus on programming should be preparing and practicing a pattern call that works. And again, it doesn't have to be fully written out choreography or anything like that. But if that's the way you do it, there's no harm in having written material or having written modules down or whatever you feel most comfortable with. That is what works for you. There's no problem with any of that. The second is preparing and practicing a singing call that works and flows so that you can also deliver that with relative confidence. Okay, I'm a believer that if you're going to get up and call, you should be able to call both a pattern call and a singing call, not getting up there and just do a singing call. And then the next time you get up and do a singing call, and you do a singing call every time you, if you're going to be a caller, be a caller. If you want to be a karaoke singer, be a karaoke singer. Okay, but don't take the time away from a dance program from the dancers just to do singing calls all the time. Okay, and what it boils down to is prior planning, preparation, and practice presents a polished performance. And you can say that 10 times real fast. Okay. What you have to remember is panic is not on that list. Okay, with all those prior planning, preparation, and practice presents a polished performance. Panic is not on that list, so don't panic. The big question asked, though, is why do we bother doing this? Well, the simple answer is that as a caller, you always want to present yourself in the best possible light. You want to give the best possible performance you can, and you want to leave the dancers wanting more. And you want to complement or enhance the dancer's evening. Part of that means you don't show up the caller that's asking you to do a guest tip, even if you know you're a much better caller. And the caller that comes to mind when I think about this is Tony Oxendine. I had the pleasure of calling with him when I was very, very inexperienced. I got up on stage and you know, it was there, and I just happened to be doing a song that he loved. He got up and he joined me. And I was absolutely, you know, I was thinking my patter was absolutely terrible. And great, I'll defer to him. No, he let me call. He stood back. He just gave a good, simple dancing routine that was comparable to mine in difficulty and everything else. He made me look good, even though there is no way in hell I would ever compare myself even in the same category as a performer as him. But he made me look good. And that's what you want to do. You want to consider the dancers. Never show up the person that's asking you, even if it's a new caller in a new club and you're you know, that person's mentor, you make them look good. Keep that in the back of your mind all the time. Now, there's many things to consider here, but all of them should be focused on one thing, and that's the dancers and making their evening better. Okay. You want to make your host feel good for asking you to participate in his or her program, and you hopefully want them to ask you to come back. But just remember, it's not about you. It's not about your knowledge. It's not about your capabilities or anything like that. In short, it's part of the preparation stage of giving a practiced and polished performance to please the participants. Forgive the alliteration. I couldn't help myself. Okay. So programming is a tool that allows you to ask questions. And that's the key to everything when you're a new caller. Being able to ask questions, but also being able to ask the right questions. I had a sergeant major in my when I was in the Army, and he stood up. We were doing our training in the intelligence branch, and he said, "If you're not sure, ask a question. There's no such thing as a stupid question." And me being the smart aleck that I was, I put my hand up, and he said, "Yes." And I said, "Why do they call them apartments when they're all stuck together like that?" I thought it was funny. Everybody else thought it was funny. The sergeant major turned to me and said, "You know what? That is a really good question. That's a good research problem. Have an answer for me tomorrow." And it is. There is a logical reason. If you're curious, go look it up. But there is a reason why they're called apartments when they're all stuck together like that. And he said, there's no such thing as a stupid question. There's questions you shouldn't ask, but there's no such thing as a stupid question. Okay. Programming is a tool that allows you to ask questions about what is the evening about? Is there a specific movement I'm asked to use or I want to use? Are there any limitations to what I can call? For example, if you're asked to call a guest tip at a mainstream or an SSD class, you should ensure that everyone that's at that dance can dance that tip. Don't get up there and do a plus tip so that only the angels that dance plus and you get one square out of a square of 20 squares that is able to dance your tip because that's all you're able to call. You be prepared to perform for the audience that's there, and you should be able to perform for the entire audience that's there. There's going to be minor variations in that, and you know, individual clubs and teaching and mentoring have different conditions, but that's just a general good rule. Okay. Now, as I said, that can vary also on your club arrangements. For instance, some clubs do a tip for tip where they do a class, club, class, club, class, club. And chances are you'll be asked to call a tip for the club dance, not the class dance. But as you progress, that'll slowly switch around. Programming allows you to gather the information necessary to enhance or augment your performance in line with the dancers and the callers' evening goals. And it's the only way to find out what they are wanting to do. What do you want? What do they want? What is being asked of you? And the only way to find that out is to ask questions. If you can think about anything that will make it better for the dancers and you can still maintain your confidence, then ask, what can I do? Or what do I do? What do I need to do to make sure it works? Just remember, it's not about your enjoyment. It's about their enjoyment. And it's definitely not about you getting up there to show how clever and how good you can be with choreography. Okay. All of this is part of that programming stage of choreography. So when you're up there and you see the host over here that asked you to call, and you've got a square of dancers are there and he's got that face or she's got that face, you better rethink what you're doing, because chances are you're never going to get asked again. Programming pattern parity. I decided to use a lot of alliteration today. I have no idea why I did that, but it's starting to sound silly. It sounded better in my head when I was writing this. Okay. Programming parity means you want your pattern choreography to complement your singing call choreography. Choreography is one part of programming. Up to here, we haven't talked anything about choreography, but it is an important part, and it's part of that programming direction that you have to. So I want to step back a bit and just talk about that. For me personally, this is how I do it, but everybody may be different. I like to start with my singing call figure. Okay. So let's say I'm asked to come and call at Yolanda's dance, and Yolanda says, yeah, we got a theme tonight. The theme is Sherlock Holmes. Okay, great. Detective theme, something like that. Great. Okay. I ask her, what are the limitations? Oh, it's a full mainstream class, and we're just, you know, we're doing an introduction to plus, but it's just a full mainstream dance. Okay, great. How good are they? You know, what's their dancing capability? Oh, they're fairly confident. Good. I'll make that decision when I start my pattern. But what I'll do is I'll start by selecting two singing call choices, two calls which I'm comfortable with. One's going to be my main choice. The other's going to be my backup. I don't expect to ever be asked to call. And most of the time, if I'm asked to call, you know, if there's other callers there, I'll turn it down because one, I'm there to dance. Two, I don't need to prove anything to myself. But three, they're there to hear the person that's calling. It's an honor to be asked. And if it's a club night or somebody I'm ready, yeah, that's fine. But if I'm there and somebody else is from out of the area, I'll defer, let him do two tips because I want that. Everybody knows who I am. But when I select these two singing calls, I treat them both as my main performance. And I'm not worried about the choreography on the singing calls, only my ability to deliver that performance. So once I've chosen my singing call, my primaries, I look at the choreography to determine if it's suitable choreography. If it's not, I'll change it. Okay, it may not be suitable because of program restrictions. You know, I'll give an example in a bit, but for instance, I have walk and dodge. They haven't taught walk and dodge here. I'll keep those singing calls, those two singing calls that I chose, but I'll get some different choreography. I do not choose my singing calls based on the choreography that's on the sheet. If you do it that way, then and it works for you, that's fine. But this gives me a lot more flexibility. Okay, and what I do after that is I isolate any key movements that should be included in my pattern that may be in the singing call. And I also identify a specific movement or a specific sequence in my singing call that I want to use as the focus for that tip, because I program each tip. So if my focus is walk and dodge, you know you're going to dance a couple of walk and dodges from different spots in the patter call. And then I'll look to see, is there anything else I want to look at? So get focused on your patter and your singing call parity. You need to have that connection between the two. Ideally, when I was taught, what I was told is, I don't want to, my mentor said, I don't want to know what your focus is. I should be able to tell you what your focus is when you're finished calling. And that's just a good way of thinking about it. So if I'm a really new caller, and let's say I have a record that has a singing call figure, and this is just one that was picked at random, okay? So I have a singing call figure, and I know they're dancing full mainstream. They've done this. They're getting into a lot of left-handed and various other things. And I looked at this. This is a singing call figure, and it actually came with the record, but it works. So I'm not going to change it. It fits with the program that I'm being asked to call. And like I said, I look at this figure. It may not be absolutely technically perfect. I've got a right and left through followed by a touch a quarter. Ooh, a hand behind the back into a right. Yeah, but that's okay. Some people argue about walk and dodge partner trade. I don't. There's nothing wrong with it if your dancers have hand contact. Other dancers, well, that's a discussion for another time. But what I do is I'll look at the figure. I know it's smooth. Dancers are familiar with it. It's comfortable to dance. It flows well and it times well. So after reviewing it to make sure everything's doable, I say, what are the key things in here? Okay, well, I've got a right hand star, head star left. Okay, I want to use that action in my pattern. It's got a flutter wheel. It's got a reverse flutter wheel. So I want to use a flutter wheel and a reverse flutter. So I'll look at that in my pattern. And walk and dodge, yeah, that's going to be the focus movement for my pattern call. So I'm going to be doing a few walk and dodges, and I make that my focus. So now I have a piece of choreography. It works with both singing call figures. Great. That's the one piece of choreography I'm going to build this tip around. Okay, so I would prepare some simple modules to get in and out and make sure I could use these figures. So I know that from a corner box or a head square through box, if I make a right hand star, head star left halfway, that's the same as a half chicken plucker, you know, right and left through, dive through, centers, pass through. So I can use that instead of doing the switch from the corner box to the right hand box out of sequence. I can do that as my chicken plucker. Great, I've got the stars covered. I've dealt with them now. I can use simple modules for the right and or for the flutter wheel and reverse flutter wheel. I want to keep these things very, very simple. We all know we can do flutter wheel, reverse flutter wheel. Okay, that's the same as doing a right and left through. But I can also do flutter wheel, sweep a quarter, reverse flutter, sweep a quarter. That's a nice little 2 couple 0. Slide through reverse flutter wheel and sweep a quarter. That's a partner line to a partner line. Great. And if I want to rotate it, because it's good to work up and down, pass the ocean, split, circulate, swing through, boys run, reverse flutter wheel. That's it. That's as far as I go. I will not put any more modules in that because there's too much to remember, and I'll write those down. But that takes care of my flutter wheel. As with any modules, you want to keep them simple and easy to remember that you can refresh at a glance if you want to do that. So all we're going to do is just look at things to move the dancers back and forth across this grid and dance with everybody in the square up and down and across as best as possible. The next thing I'm looking at is my focus movement. Now, my focus movement was walk and dodge. So in this case, I'm programming my tip. I've got my singing call figure that I'm going to use. So I want something that I can do with walk and dodge. Corner box, slide through, boys walk, girls dodge. Hey, that's just a little different, but it's easy. Boys run, reverse flutter wheel, slide through. Wow, that's very, very similar to my singing call figure, and it works. It's a nice little corner box 0. Slide through, girls walk, boys dodge. Hey, we're going the other way. Girls run and flutter wheel. Beautiful. Those two are very, very similar. It hits the flutter wheel, it hits the reverse flutter wheel, it hits the walk and dodge, and it's just slightly different, but still easy to dance. I've got 2 corner box figures. Partner line, pass through, boys run, walk and dodge. Partner trade, reverse flutter wheel. Or from a column, touch a quarter, walk and dodge. And then after that, centers pass through, centers in, cast off, star through, double pass through, first couple right, next couple to left. Okay, that one's a little more complicated, but I like it, so I wrote it down. That's it. I am not going to overdo this choreography at all. I'm not going to try and write down 1,000 figures. I don't want 1,000 figures. I want to have something that I can see, that I can practice, I can prepare, I can get polished, and that I can sit down there and look down over on that little piece of paper or down at my computer screen if it's on there and refresh and remember these things at a glance. So this might be what a cue sheet look. That's my entire preparation right there. I could have that up on the patter record. When I load my patter record, I might have something like this. It's got my singing call figure up there. And there's my flutter wheel stuff. And it's got my walk and dodge stuff. And that's how big it displays on my screen. Okay, I actually bought myself a bigger screen. I've got a 16-inch monitor. I can read that from a fair bit away. Just at a glance, yep, I'm there. And I use the same layout each time. Corner box, partner line, that's it. I'm not worried about resolutions. I'm not worried about anything else. I'm keeping it very, very simple. And I know I can move across the square and go head square through. I can do this. Slide through, make a right-hand star, head star left halfway. I can do this. Finish it with a half chicken plucker and I'm back home. So that half chicken plucker I've got in there. All of those things mix and match. And we've had a dozen sessions on how to mix and match modules. The thing to remember is keep it simple, keep it usable for you. Okay, so now we've matched our choreography from the singing call and we've matched our choreography to the patter call. We've got our dancers, we've asked our questions, we've got a program. Now we have to really look at the music we're using, and we need to select that music with care. We've already chosen our singing calls. We've already prepared our refreshing at a glance sheet, and we've looked at these things a number of times. So I'm not going to dwell on it, but suffice it to say, if you want it to be functional and simple, make it functional and simple for you. Whatever works is good. If it's on a binder, if it's on a piece of paper, if it's on your computer screen, that doesn't really matter. Next thing, you're matching the patter music to complement your singing calls. I recommend, and this is just me, but different callers are going to say, I choose 2 singing calls. I choose 1 piece of patter music. The reason I do that, and I practice that patter music, practice entire tips, is because if I'm comfortable with the patter music, I don't have to think too much. If I'm very, very comfortable with it, I can use it because I know my choreography is going to work with both singing calls. I know both singing calls are going to be tied to this. So choose only 1 piece of patter music and the 2 singing calls. And that way you can use your figures and all your choreography in all of them. You want to practice your patter with your modules and your chicken plucker and your foundation modules and everything else that we've learned here over the last 3 years. What you're doing here is just moving the dancers up and down and across the grid. Don't try and get fancy or clever. Just deliver good, danceable choreography that you're confident in. And you're confident, if you're confident in your material and your delivery, the dancers are going to be confident in you. Okay? Don't be clever. Just be confident. Some people say, if you're not confident, fake it. Don't do that. Be confident. If you prepare and you plan properly and you practice, you've got enough to be confident. And remember, if you weren't able to do it, and that caller that asked you wasn't confident in your ability to call, they would not have asked you in the first place. They believe in you. It's time you started believing in yourself. Now, most callers do all of this stuff very, very quickly. Today, they develop playlists. And if they're working with a new caller, they'll include the songs that newer caller that works with them will have in their playlist. For example, if Yolanda was teaching me how to call and I was her student, and she asked me, says, Mel, I think you're ready to call a tip tonight. I say, okay, well, what are you going to call? I'm going to call Every Street's a Boulevard. She'd probably have that programmed into her playlist where I'm going to call. Where am I calling, Yolanda? Oh, you do the 4th tip. Okay, I'm not doing a workshop tonight. I'd like you to do the 4th tip. Great. What do we do? It's full mainstream. Great. What song am I doing? Well, I've got 2. She'll program both of them just in case. But they'll be on that slot because it's easy to just skip over one. But it's all done. That's her part of her programming, getting ready for the evening. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay. The reason most of them would do that, I don't know who's in, but Daryl was here last week. So for instance, if I was doing an autumn harvest dance as an example, and Daryl Clendenin came to my dance. Okay, well, I might not, I might have had Shine on Harvest Moon on my playlist. Now, if those of you that don't know that, that's an old Chinook song. I think it's number 25. But that's one that Daryl recorded. It's a beautiful song because it doesn't matter if you've ever heard that song before or not, you're going to hear everybody in that hall going, shine on, harvest moon, up in the sky. And they'll do it. You can't help yourself because everybody's heard that somewhere. If that's the only lyrics that they know of that song, they'll sing it. It makes them feel good. Great record, Chinook 25. But if Daryl came into my hall and I had that programmed, I wouldn't call that song because I know that's one of his songs. There's no way I can do it better than he can, but I would ask him to do it, and if he wanted to do it, if not, that's great. But if he said, no, I still wouldn't do that song because that's something he's known for. And all of you probably know one or two callers that have 2 or 3 songs that they're absolutely known for. And if they came into your hall, you wouldn't call their song while they're there. It's just bad. It's bad karma. It's not polite. Okay. So be aware of those little things. And most importantly, if you're comfortable, the dancers are going to be comfortable. Okay. So all this leads to asking good questions. So for new callers, it seems like a caller is asked to get up and do a guest tip. So for instance, Barry Wanson is great at this. Okay. Barry's there and I say, hey, Barry, would you like to do a tip? And he can walk up, slap down a record or plug in the stick, select a song and just go. And it seems like, oh, wow, he's got no problem getting up there. He's got the theme of the record. He's got the theme of the evening. He's tied his patter and his singing call together. He's got all this and he's doing this right off the top of the head with absolutely no problem, no preparation, no practice, no nothing. Don't believe yourself. I can assure you that is never the case. Guys like Barry, guys like Daryl, guys like Tony Oxendine, many, many others, they're drawing from years and years of experience having gone through this. They're drawing from their own observation of what the dance has been like so far. And they probably asked and answered all of these questions in their head, knowing that, you might ask me to dance or to call. I better start working in my mind. Well, if I do this, this, and this, it's easy mainstream. Yeah, I can do this and I can do this song that ties in with the theme of the evening. And he's gone through this whole programming thing. The reason they're able to do that is because they've been doing it for so long. As a new caller, you'll get there. But it's only the benefit of experience that gives them the ability to seemingly deliver that practiced and polished performance on the fly. Okay, so where you need to start as a newer caller or when you're teaching somebody is teach them to ask the right questions, and asking the right questions to prepare is an important part of programming. Ask those questions yourself and ask them to yourself. And if necessary, ask them of the person that, has asked you to call. If you can do that much, asking those questions, most of your programming and your preparation choices, you're going to find are already going to be made for you. Okay. And it's a really, really good start to programming a tip. So if you're asked, ask good questions. Some questions like, what is the program? Very important question. Hey, Barry, would you like to call a tip then? Yeah, sure. Great. Well, Barry knows I call basic and mainstream, but I'm calling an A1 dance night. I didn't bother to tell him that. So he gets up and calls a basic tip. He can pull it off, but he knows I called the A1 and it's a basic dance. I didn't tell him that. What happens if he calls an A1 tip? Then he looks foolish. He would ask that question. Are there program restrictions? Yeah, we're full mainstream, but we haven't done Ferris wheel yet. Oh, okay, fine. He won't call a Ferris wheel. Is there a specific movement you want to focus on? This happens a lot with newer callers. If I'm mentoring a caller and I know where this caller's ability are, I said, okay, I'd like you to, next week, I'd like you to call a tip. And can you do your focus on, let's say, reverse flutter wheel? I'd like you to use flutter wheel and reverse flutter wheel. That's going to be the focus of your tip. Is there an evening theme for the dance? Is it a Valentine's Day dance? So you might want to do a love song. Is it a pirate theme dance? You could do pirates or ocean stuff. Is it a beach party type dance? You might want to do Beach Boys stuff. All of those things are great questions. A very important question is, what tip will you be calling? If you can ask that, generally, most people, when they ask somebody to call, if they've got a time ahead, they're going to slot you in probably the 4th tip or the tip after the break sorry, not the first, but the second tip after the break, if there's a middle break, because those are the tips where you would generally get slotted in. That's where you want to have a good solid performance. It's relaxing, but it's also complementary, and you can build with power because you know you're leading into something. It gives you a chance to shine without doing the whole massive thing, and it still gives the caller that's hosting a chance to pick up if you accidentally drop the ball, or to calm down if you built him up so high, or anything else to keep with his structure or her structure of the evening. Asking that tip, when is it in the program? Early, you might want light and peppy. After workshop, you want it relaxing and rewarding. If it's towards the end of the evening, you might want a different approach. You might want nothing new or nothing difficult in the patter, but something invigorating for the singing call to lift the dancers up before the last tip, so they go on a high, they can come down and leave on a high. Okay. When you take the time to ask those questions, you stand a much better chance of impressing the dancers. But more importantly, it makes your presentation easier to manage, because most of those unknown fears and most of those unknown factors have already been dealt with just by asking simple questions. And doing that, communication is the key. If you're asked, especially if you're a new caller who asked you, you know well ahead of time what 2 singing calls you're going to be choosing from, because you usually get time to prepare. They may be ones already planned, or if they don't, it ensures that, sorry, let me rephrase this. You're going to know well ahead of time what 2 singing calls you're going to choose from. So communicate with the caller that asked you what 2 singing calls you would like to use. They may have already planned that, or they may have another guest that's already doing one of those. So they can let you know ahead of time if you need to make a change. If they don't, it also ensures that they don't plan, or they don't program into the evening one or both of your singing calls as their calls for the evening. Okay, and that is very, very important if you're doing a theme dance, because there's only so many, songs about pirates out there. So if you've got a pirate song and he's got the same pirate song, you might have a conflict if you don't communicate that. So just like it is important to programming your tip, the next logical extension of programming goes into programming an evening. And when you program an evening, or you program a class, or you program even a whole year, the principles of programming remain exactly the same. And the best way to do that is clearly state your objectives beforehand. What do you want to achieve? Okay. Then write it out in a table for yourself. And this gets out easy, a lot easier with time, to the point eventually you're going to be able to start doing this in your head. But for new callers and newer callers, and even more experienced callers, it's something that I would highly, highly recommend. If you write it out, you have less chance of repeating yourself with music and choreography from week to week. Mike Seastrom gave an excellent presentation on programming. If you're not sure about it, go and see the GSI school films. There's a link on the website. But it talks, he writes down not only his program, his comments, what he wore, what music he used, every single dance he does, because it allows him to go. And if he's going to be calling in Austin, Texas, and then 6 months later he's going to Austin, Texas, he'll go back and he'll review that and say, okay, I called these songs last time. This is a real popular one. I might do that one again, but I want to make sure I don't do any of those songs. Oh yeah, I was wearing my blue fancy shirt. Okay, this time I want to maybe wear a yellow shirt. So he doesn't repeat. Every dance is going to be new and invigorating. It may be the same dance he called in Louisiana that he's calling in Austin, but it's not going to feel like the same dance to the dancers as the one he did last year. So, and with today computers, that's a very, very easy thing to get by, because you can record all these things. For me, when I'm programming, and this works for me, I like to program 12-minute blocks. Okay. Some callers do it different. Whatever works for you, works for you. Whatever works for your club, works for your club. I said today, I absolutely loathe 6, 7, 8, 10-minute patter calls. I hate them. It's too much time on the dance floor for dancers. Dancers today say, oh, we get tired so fast. Yeah, that's because you're dancing for 6 minutes and then another 4 minutes. You're moving for 10 minutes straight. Well, moving for 10 minutes straight is what every cardio workout thing wants you to do, is move for 10 minutes straight with highs and lows and periods of rest. And then you're going to do that how many times in an evening? Doing a 4-minute pattern and a 4-minute singing call is 8 minutes. You've got enough breaks in standing, and the dancers get more dance. It feels like they're doing more. It's easier to manage. and away you go. For me, that gives me 5 tips per hour, say an average dance, 2.5 hours, 5 tips per hour with lots of break time, lots of dance time, lots of social time, lots of time to get a drink or go to the toilet. Me personally, I found that this is a less tiring format for the dancers. All of the dancers I've asked said they actually like that more than the longer dancing, with the exception of teaching. They expect teaching tips to be longer. Structure it what's good for your club. Other clubs that I go to, they say, no, it's a 6-minute pattern. Other callers I've talked to say, no, my patterns are 7 minutes long and I do a 4-minute hold down and they get a 3-minute break. That's it. That's my dance. That's the way I like to call. That's the way I'm doing it. If it works for, and it does work for that guy, if it works for you, what works for you is what is the best way of doing it. Just remember that. How I do it may be different. Okay. Me, I find that the dancers are much more receptive and they more aware longer. It gives them that ability to remain focused and enjoy the dance more. So what I've got here, this is just a simple programming sheet that's been used before. So what I've done is I've structured my evening. I got my patter call, my singing call. This is a club dance, by the way. Patter call, singing call, patter call, singing call, patter call, singing call, break. I had a guest caller. We talked about that the week before. He's coming in to call. Can anybody tell me what they think the theme of this evening might be? I can't see you, so you're going to have to speak up.
Fun in Acapulco.
What was that?
Fun in Acapulco.
Fun in Acapulco?
No, just
Possibly.
kidding. I guess moon.
Moon.
Moon. Yeah, it's all about the moon. It was just a theme for the night. Why not? You know, so, and where have we got? Okay, I like to do this. I like to have everybody, I do a very short, like this is going to be my longest patter. It's usually about 6 or 8 minutes long. This is where I start my dance on time, but some people don't arrive on time. I like to do a Sicilian circle that gets everybody up and dancing and a way to go. And I don't do a singing call on that. That's the big meet and greet. I end that in a big circle with the right, left hand, say hi to everybody. And then we all go have a short break and I'll get around and start saying hi to all the people I haven't said hello to. My next tip, patter, I'll review any previous material. So in this case, walk and dodge is something that we looked at, and I wanted to look at it a little bit more because we've done boys walk, girls dodge, girls walk, boys dodge from left hand, right hand. So I'm going to review some of that previous material. The next tip, patter call, workshop. I'm going to reinforce the left hand stuff like Dixie style to a wave, spin the top from a left hand wave, walk and dodge from a left hand wave, centers, scoot back from a nothing fancy. I may do it all, I may not, but I've made a note of what I want to look at. I've got a guest caller coming in. Okay, I initially had Blue Moon somewhere else, but they had Blue Moon the record. I know they can do that one. So I said, let them do Blue Moon. It fits in with the theme. It's great. I've got no problem with that. Then we'll have a break. I gave them the tip just before the break. I know they're capable of it. Not a big problem. The patter for afterwards, I want to bring these people back in because it's always, you know, here we are. That breaks in the wrong spot there. I gave him the second tip before the break. Then I've got this one as the break. And that's a sing-along song that I did because what happens is if you have a break in the middle of the evening, you're going to lose probably about 1 square. If you've got 3 or 4 squares, you're going to lose at least 1 square because they're going to go in and start getting everything set up for lunch. So I did a nice pickup before the halftime break and I did a sing-along song. And there's Shine on Harvest Moon, which is one of Daryl Clendenin's records. Fantastic song. Good one for just before a break. Also an excellent one for ending an evening on. After the break, I want a good piece of peppy music. Alpine Hoedown's great for that. One More Night. Okay, it's not really a moon song, but it says night in there. It's close enough, but it's a nice peppy pickup song that I can go. The patter call for the next one, upbeat, quicker tempo, I'm going to get. If Jim had done a really, really good tip and he's prepared a second one, I might ask him to do another tip here. If not, I can do Dancing Moon. But I know he does Blue Moon of Kentucky, so hey, great. We'll get him to do Blue Moon of Kentucky if he's there. Then solid. I want to pick up and build the tempo, a power song, not the last tip, but the second last tip. And then for the last tip, be ready with 2 singing calls. And I know that Jim calls Neon Moon as well. And I know we practice that as a duet, so I might even ask them to get up and do that as a duet at the end. Depends on how the evening goes. But there's lots of room for flexibility in an evening like that. This right here, this plan, nice and simple, notes that I can scribble down quickly are important. This sheet here is very, very important. It's one that's not done often enough. And that's writing any comments down. You know, what went good, what went bad, what has to change, where something, you know, I really need to look at, hey, that figure doesn't work with that record, or whatever. All of those, make sure you write all of those comments down. Now, this is just a simple example. In the notes, there's a 2-page, this is 1 page, this is a 2nd page, and it's a blank sheet. But if you want to use it, fine, by all means use it. If you don't, develop your own. As I said, what works for you is what's best. The biggest thing is take your time with it. Programming sounds like one of those things that's really easy to do. And with a lot of practice and experience, like I was giving Barry as an example, or Daryl as an example, it becomes second nature to them. It looks like they don't even have to do anything and they just get up there and go. They've done all this. It is, however, something that should never, and I mean never, be overlooked. If you take the time to program, regardless of how simple your programming is, your evening, your class, your year, everything, you're going to save yourself a lot of anxiety, and you're going to create for yourself a diary notebook for self-assessment and self-improvement. It makes everything better for you and for the dancers. What I gave was an easy guide. It's one I've used effectively in the past, and I recognize every situation is going to be different. Some people's sessions are 2 hours long. Some are 3.5 hours long. I love those ones. Some have 2 separate levels running for evening and don't take a break until the end of the evening. What you have to do is find out all those questions, ask them, and from there you can build the program into what works best for you and the situation you're doing. Once you have a program, you have to plan your actions so that it's easy to follow, but yet flexible enough to adapt to any changes that may occur. You know, I may have had, let's say Yolanda is my student and I'm mentoring her at my club. If I had one, I wish I did. So I've got her scheduled to do 2 tips, and I get Barry and John come from Australia, you know, to her club in Prince George, British Columbia. Well, I would just say to Yolanda, I know you practice and prepared this. You call every week. Do you mind if I said, because I'd like to get our 2 guests from Australia to call? Great, not a problem. There's enough flexibility in the plan to allow that. And if not, I would take a step back and say, hey, you know, and just make it into a big open party night. You have to be able to adapt to each situation. Okay. But once you have a program, it's easy. When you create a program, it tells you the what and the where and the timing breakdown of how the evening is going to go. You see that at all conventions. There's a program, who's doing what song, who's doing what, here's the timings, and you stick to that. That's like, oh, rigid. Program conventions, for the most part, are stupid. If callers had courtesy and common sense, programming would take care of itself. Unfortunately, today, many have a big ego which overrides common sense and courtesy. You can quote me on that if you want, but it's a truth. Okay? It allows you to identify your goals for the evening and each slot for the evening, what you want in there. It allows you to identify and manage the flow of the evening. It allows you to identify any themes and restrictions. When you develop your plan, what you need to do is reach the individual target goals. So you've got those set. What do I need to do to achieve them? What choreography do I need to focus on? You know, what music do I wish to use for both my patter and my singing call? Are they tied together? And more important, in the developing of my plan, practicing your plan. Practice your patter call and your singing call. Practice your choreography with your modules. Practice your singing call separately. And then do the part that most callers forget. Practice your patter and your singing call as a tip. Change your singing call, practice your patter and your other singing call as a tip, then take a break. And then go back and do it again. Practice, practice, practice. Plan your work, then work your plan. Okay. I don't know who said it, that calling is just a hobby and everything else, and it should be fun. Absolutely true. Calling is fun, but calling is also work. And if you plan your work and work your plan, you're going to be successful. If you don't If you fail to plan, you've planned to fail. It's that simple. And number 4, the part that a lot of people forget, MARY. MARY is an acronym that means monitoring, evaluation, review, and improve. When you monitor something, you have to make quick notes. What you've done during the, just make it, jot down, make it on a notepad, whatever works for you, but make notes and go back later and fill in those notes. You do that when you're evaluating. You've got to set time to evaluate the happenings of that evening. That includes both what went right and what went wrong, because don't always focus on, oh, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. Because when you look at your notes afterwards, you go, oh, geez, that was a terrible night. Could have been the greatest night of your life, but you made one little mistake, but that's all you're focused on. You're doing it wrong. Put the right and the wrong. You need to review, see if what was right or see what went wrong in your plan. Was it because of a deviation? Was it because of an unforeseen event that caused an issue? Whatever it was, if you've got your rights, why did that go so right? If you got your wrongs, why did that go wrong? And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to review, the power went out here. Oh, okay. A fuse blew on my thing. I had to stop, that's why we lost that, somebody had a heart attack on the floor that brought the theme of the evening down a little bit. We had a flood and we were dancing. We decided to put hip waders on. We were dancing and we were belly button deep in water. It made it hard to keep the timing, with the music, whatever reason. I mean, these are ridiculous things, but you get the idea. If you can identify what happened and what went wrong and identify what happened and what went right, you're evaluating your material, you're reviewing it, and you're saying, great. Once you've got those notes and you can look at them objectively, you can make any modifications you need to future programs to mitigate risk and, more importantly, improve your craft. It allows you to be prepared to continue. You can only fake it for so long, but with a good, well-planned and practiced program, you can be confident for a long time. At the bottom there, I wrote that down, and it's really, really important. Ideally, the dancers aren't going to know if you took a lot of time planning, preparing, and practicing for your program and your performance and everything else. They're not going to know it. They're just going to enjoy dancing. But I can guarantee you, if you don't make a plan and follow it and have an idea of what you want to achieve, they're going to know every time you get behind that mic that you're not prepared, you haven't planned, you haven't practiced, you don't have a program, you don't have an idea of what you want to do. That's going to stand out. It may not be every single time, but they're going to notice the difference. Right. That's a very quick overview on programming. There's a lot of information there. I did go over some of it, like the choreography development and everything else, in very, very quickly, because we've had sessions on that in particular, a number of sessions. We've had really good sessions on programming, but it's important to tie it all together. This is the type of session I would have liked to have done right at the beginning that said, here's programming, and then we can nut out each one of these things, and we may come back and do that later on. But it should give you the general idea of what to look for to enhance your own success and your own capabilities. And that's very simple. Set your target goals or your objectives out for the evening. Determine what you need to do to achieve those goals. Set your mini goals or program your minor targets to meet those goals, and then tie them all together with a theme. Tie your pattern, your singing call together with a theme. Tie your evening together with the theme of the evening. And ultimately, you're going to have success. Let's open the floor up. Mark, I'll start with you. Is there any comments or questions or anything in the chat?
No, I didn't get any.
Okay. So, oh, hi, Daryl. Hi. I was talking about you guys. Sorry, I didn't see you come in. Let's open. Has anybody got any questions, comments, queries, points? A way that you do it that might be different? Because like I said, this is only the way I do it, but how you do it might be different from you. Masako, how do you prepare for a tip? If you're asked to call a tip, how would you prepare for an evening tip?
Excuse me, did you call me?
Yes, I was saying, if you're asked to call an evening tip, or you came over here and you're visiting one of our clubs and said, oh, would you like to call a dance? Now,
I usually call at my club, usually club nights, but I don't usually get asked to call in different clubs yet.
Okay.
So
How do you prepare for your tip that you get to do at your club?
Before I didn't know anything, but because of this session, I try to have a focus module and then pick a song, pick a singing call and a pattern, and try as much as I can to make both connected or something like that. But I'm not at all good at doing this thing, programming. I'm very bad.
You might be better than you think. It takes time. I know from our previous conversations, you said you like to take a movement for a focus, and I believe you find a singing call that has that movement in it, and then you write 1 or 2 modules only for your pattern, and you use your singing call figure as your pattern. That in itself is a small step program. And I know you practice before you perform because you've told me that a number of times. Planning, preparation, tying them together, practicing, and then performing. You may not have it all down formally as this long process, but you do program. And I will bet you that your performance is much better doing that than it is if you did not do that and just chose a song at random and said, right, call.
I just try to practice and practice as much as I can. And I really like the what you said earlier, that this part, dancers may not know if you plan, practice, and prepare your program, but they will definitely know every time if I don't.
That's true.
That
is true.
Good advice. Thank you.
Key, what do you do to prepare for if you're asked to call a guest tip or plan your evenings? You're muted, Key. You're muted.
Yes. Okay, I usually sort of choose a couple of focal move, and then I choose the singing call first because, you know, sometimes those moves might not have good singing call figures. So that singing call would have those focal move, and then I develop my pattern. And in the pattern, I might extend to various, formations.
I believe you do a lot of isolated site, 2-couple calling with your pattern calls. Is that correct?
Yeah, sometimes when I try to teach them something, I use the 2-couple thing, try to not be distracted by the other dancers. And then they will then dance with a normal square.
Absolutely. There was a comment in the chat. I made the statement, don't outshine the host. But what happens when the host is having a really bad night or they did not prepare and plan and everything else? Your planning, your preparation, your practicing really pays off. It will enhance the evening. But I still say, do not outshine the host. You can get up and you can call a good, solid, fun dance and deliver a very solid performance that's enjoyable for the dancers to dance to. And yet it may be a better performance than what your host is doing. But you're dancing and you're calling a solid performance for the dancers to enjoy. If, for instance, I'm calling and I'm having a really, really, really bad night, and that does happen, and Barry has come to visit my club or Stephen Potter's come to visit from Texas, and he gets up there and says, you know what, Mel's having a really bad night. Let's do something fun. He doesn't have to say that on the mic, but he gets up there and he does his most famous high power, high energy drive song and wails out this ballad that's just go, oh, super fantastic. The dancers will enjoy that tip immensely. But what you've done is you basically, if I'm having that really bad night or the caller is not prepared for a good night, you've taken away any possibility of that caller recovering because they're having a really bad night. I had one of those nights. I was getting deployed. My kids were living with my ex-wife. She decided that she couldn't handle that anymore. I had been gone for 6 months. I was told I was going to be home for at least a year before I had gone because I'd spent almost 3 years out of the country at that point. I got home. I now had a year on the ground, and I found out in 8 days I was being deployed again. I had a whole course of vaccinations into me, so I was like I was on steroids, caffeine, and a high flu all at the same time. My kids were going, my current fiance has now had dealings with my ex-wife because it dumped the kids on my current fiance, just like that. All this happened on that evening. I was not having a good night, and I was just trying to deliver a good, solid performance. I wasn't even trying to shine. Now, it was not a good night of calling, but if somebody had come in and said, right, I'm going to give the best performance in the world, and they do, wow. And there's nothing I can do. I can't recover because of my own issues. I can still deliver a fairly solid performance, but not to that level. I've got nowhere to go. And Barry would probably see that something like that is happening to me and say, right, I'm going to give the dancers a good time. It's a solid performance. I might give them something they can sing along to, pick their mood up again. But it's going to be here a little bit so that I've got room to maneuver. That's skill, that's experience of an experienced caller saying, hey, that guy's having a hard time. Okay. You never, ever want to outshine your host. Even if you're a better caller, you always want to make your host look good. You may be infinite. It doesn't matter if you get up there and call Alaman left, right, and left grand all night, and you're still doing a better dance. That doesn't matter. It's the dancers that's important. Betsy, you had your hand up. And then I think Barry did.
In that instance, what I might do, possibly between the patter and the singing call, would be to thank the host caller and remind people that the host caller is the one who taught them, and they're the ones that create the dance for them all the time, and we really appreciate them, which might give a boost to the host caller who knows they're having a bad night.
And I've actually seen you do that. I remember one, it was just when you say you don't get up and thank the caller saying, wow, I want to thank you and everything else because, and I want to remind everybody, he's the guy that taught you. Sorry if I'm stealing your thunder here, Betsy, but the way I heard you do it was, wow, this guy taught you to dance really good. I feel like I could do anything up here. And he gave the dancers a compliment that was really a compliment to the caller. It was a left-handed compliment that said, all the dancers said, oh, you know what? Yeah, he gives us a good night every week. This is a bad. And then I believe, if I remember correctly, you went off and said, what's going on? To find out what was going on with him. So absolutely, always make your host look good, even if it takes a compliment like that to get the dancer's mind space and give him a break or her a break. Glenn put, if you are new but don't have the flexibility to throw your preparation, to throw out your prep, tone it down. Absolutely a valid comment. This is why when you do your preparation and practicing, you build flexibility into your program. As you gain experience as a caller, you're going to find a lot of this stuff is easier, and you're going to be able to flip out songs, flip out choreography, change the tone of the evening, adapt. Don Beck came in, he gave a really, really good session of things that are going to happen on the floor, things that you can control and cannot control. Corey Geis gave another presentation, always expect the unexpected. And if you don't have the flexibility in that program to say, this isn't working, and throw it out, okay, then just tone it down. Your idea is always, dancers are first and foremost. They should always leave the floor smiling and hopefully singing the last song you sang. Barry, did you have a comment in there? I saw you moving. I didn't know if you were waving your hand or just adjusting the mic. falling off the chair. Yes, Bob.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I had something happen today, and I just want to know if I did the right thing. Okay, I've been doing a series of ABC Introduction to Dance events for a community center here.
Sorry, just clever. Is that the ABC program that you're using?
Right.
Okay.
And generally, I've had a square. Once in a while, I've had 2 squares. Today, I had a couple and a half with my wife that made 2 couples. And so instead of even using the ABC stuff, since these folks were all angeling for me, I said, what are you struggling with at your mainstream dances? Is there any calls that you're just going, what? And so we reviewed mainstream calls for them. It was helpful to me because it let me review for myself how to teach some of those mainstream calls with a very receptive audience. But it wasn't my plan at all. It was just what I had to do, I guess.
Okay, so what you're saying is you're at an ABC dance. You're expecting a bunch of these new dancers to come in. None of them showed up. All you had was essentially dancers that had done this program and the ones that angel with you. So,
well, yeah, I just had my angels.
Okay, so within that event, what you're saying is you weren't doing an ABC dance then. You had the venue, you had the opportunity, you had the time. So you said, okay, what can I do to help you be better dancers? What would you like to do? Or would you like to just go for coffee? They said, well, what do you want to do? How do you want to improve? Is there anything you need? You gave them what they wanted. Were they smiling at the end?
They were extremely happy. And because
then I think you've answered your own question. Did you do the right thing? You adapted to the dancers. Absolutely.
And what surprised me is that 2 of them insisted on paying me because they know I do this as a voluntary thing.
Yeah. My opinion, others may be different, is you did absolutely the wrong thing. Or sorry, absolutely the right thing. Do these dancers dance with another caller at another club and they're taking lessons there?
Absolutely, yes. And it's Mike Sikorsky is one of them, and the other was Jerry Junk.
Okay, both of them are excellent callers. The only thing I would probably do if that was me would say is to call up Mike or Jerry, whoever they're dancing with, and say, "Yeah, my ABC didn't go well. I had your dancers there, and they asked me to look at this. I did this. Are you okay with that?" Yep, no problem. And both of them would say, "Yeah, no problem, great." But that's just a courtesy. That's the only thing I would do.
Okay, well, thank you.
Otherwise, some I know Mike and Jerry are very confident in their calling, but some callers would look at that as you're trying to poach their dancers if in some areas, and sometimes local politics outweighs common sense and courtesy.
Well, thank you.
I think you did the absolute right thing. How many people think you did the right thing?
He can't see.
Yeah.
He can't see us, but a lot of hands are raised.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope he's not looking while he's driving.
Well, actually, I'm sitting in the car. My wife, we went to the library to take some books back for the kids, and my wife's inside shopping at the grocery store.
Oh, okay. I figured you were going down the road and just listening.
No, he's on the right-hand side of the car. He's in the States.
Yeah.
If he was over here, I think he was driving. Of course, he could have a camera reversed too.
Just a quick newbie question. I haven't heard of the ABC program before.
It's about a dozen core calls, maybe 10, and then you have 4 or 5 calls that you use on any given night. And over the course of about a month, you've covered 30 to 35 calls. And it was kind of the first effort that Jerry Story made towards something that might revitalize square dancing.
Thank you.
It's hard to find much about it anymore because it was all on Jerry's website, and a lot of that has disappeared off the web.
Okay.
Yeah, Dick Reuter was one of those. He's still I think he's still around, but you're absolutely correct. But there is a few things like the Minnesota site, ABC, the European a couple of the European sites have it, and there's a couple of articles on it as well. But Square Your Dance has something on the ABC Square Dancing as well. Just seeing if I could find the website for that.
It's it's fairly easy to find the original ABC list. And then if you're doing a lot of one night stand kinds of things, it's at least the core group of calls are kind of the ones you need. They can teach in a half an hour or so and then dance for an hour and a half. And I've worked up a lot of figures for those core calls.
And the idea was with ABC that you could start on night A and come and be there on the second night B and the third night C, or you can start on B on the second night and go B, C, A, or even show up at the third night and have C, A, B, and you would have the whole program, never mind when you showed up.
And unfortunately, what I've discovered, and I think other callers have discovered, is since it doesn't require you to be there every week, sometimes people just don't show up.
Yeah, you should be. They should be told that they have to show up 3 weeks in a row, but doesn't matter on which of the 3 they start.
Daryl has his hand up.
Oh, on the off chance, now the pictures I have, I don't see any new callers. I think you're all highly experienced. But on the
there's a few in here.
Oh, shut up. On the off chance that there might be a couple there that I don't see because their picture isn't up. As far as guest tip, now you call them brackets in Australia, right? Where you get up and just do one pattern of singing call. I always tell the new callers, have a tip. One tip that you own, pattern and singing call. That when you get asked to get up and do that tip, there's only 2 things you're going to be able to prove to those dancers. One of them is that you can call, and the other one is they can dance to you. And that's the whole program right there, isn't it? Make sure that you've got
pretty much
a tip, just one tip that you own, that you know darn good and well that you're going to be able to do and not make a mistake. And it has material that you don't have to worry about any floor getting through. You're not going to get up there and workshop somebody else's dance anyway. Get up there and do a nice job. With that,
absolutely, and that is very, very sound advice. We've given that so many times here that every caller should have at least one go-to tip. As you gain experience, 2 go-to tips, and then if you're asked to call a dance and you get advance notice for it, prepare for that as well. And that's what the program, that is probably one of the greatest bits of advice for any new caller that Daryl just gave right there. Be ready to call at any time. Always have a default in your back pocket. Yes, John.
Yeah, if I'm visiting another caller's club, what I'll do during the night, even if I'm not asked to call, I'll be carefully watching what he is using and what he is workshopping. And I try and include that in my pattern and my singing call.
That's what I was saying about, for instance, if Brian or Daryl or Barry was coming to a dance and they've got, well, between them probably more than a century or even a century and a half of calling experience between them. They do that. They can mentally program their dance based on the dancer's capability. They'll ask, what is that? What is the program level? They'll ask that question. Are there any limitations on the floor? Yeah, I was watching that square breakdown on Dixie style. Okay, I'll stay away from Dixie style. They'll go through and ask all those questions, and they've got the experience and the wisdom and all the background knowledge to say, right, the theme is moon. Daryl, I've been picking on your record because I absolutely love it. Shine on Harvest Moon. Chinook 25, if you don't have it, I did look it up. Great singer. And if it's a moon theme, he might pull that record out, but he won't use the choreography that's on it. He's got enough in here to change the choreography to suit the needs of the floor. He will have done all of these programming steps in his head because he's done it for so long on the fly. That's the mark of an experienced caller. When a new caller, for instance, Yolanda or Masako or any of the new callers that have been here, if you're at a dance and you're traveling somewhere, and Yolanda, you're down at Steve's, maybe you go down to Texas or you go down to see Brian in Vancouver, and he says, Yolanda, would you like to do a tip? What Daryl just said there about having something in your back pocket, you may not have planned it, but if you've got it in your back pocket, great. And you can easily and quickly modify it because he's confident you've got the ability to do that. Or he wouldn't have asked you directly. He might have said, hey, welcome to come. If I asked you to do a tip, would you be comfortable with that? Or he would say, hey, Yolanda, would you like to do a tip? I can book you in for the third one. You know, how that question is asked tells exactly how that caller is feeling about you. And if you just say, would you like to do a gift tip? They would not have asked if they didn't have the confidence you had the ability to move dancers comfortably, or you've got something prepared that can show you are a great caller. And as Daryl said, if you've got something in your back pocket that does that, great. That's the sign of experience. And that's a sign of growth. Yes, Scotty.
Yeah. Old mate of mine there in the US put me onto a good tip as well. John Gorski. I went along with him to quite a few dances. And because I was Australian and I had a funny accent, after the first time I called, he said, you're having trouble with your accent and the way you call. He said, next time, before you call, tell a little story. He said, and that gets them tuned into your voice and the way that you're speaking. And it went way lots better after that. And it only takes just a little story of a few minutes, and then go into and you'll find that they've now tuned into your voice and the way that you carry your pronunciation.
That's an excellent comment. That's also an excellent tip. We have callers from Japan. We've got callers from New Zealand, callers from Australia, callers from Europe. And a lot of them will have that discussion in English, mainly to get people's ears tuned in. A lot of other callers, what happens is they'll tend to tell a joke or tell a story that goes on, and the dancers tune out before they finish it. Make it short, make it pithy, use different terminology to get them used to the voice. But also what a lot of callers will do is they'll do their opening with directional calling. Join hands, circle to the left. Find your corner. Turn your corner, Alaman left, back to the partner, right arm turn, back to the corner, Alaman left with your left hand, do side do your partner. Girls, into the middle, make a left hand star. They put all of that extra words in there in a very simple opening just to tune the dancer's ear to their voice. There's a number of ways of doing that. There's a lot of really, really good presentation techniques, but it's very, very wise. If you don't have the ability to do that, exactly what you said, Scotty, something short and simple to tune the dancer's ears to you is always, always helpful, because that's what you want, is everybody listening. Steve, you've been very quiet today. How do you program and prepare?
I haven't done that much, but what I would do would have the pattern and the singing call planned out, and practice and practice and practice.
Yes, Betsy.
When you were talking about going in and just being able to stand up and do a tip, it reminded me of the U.S. National Convention, where previously you got a 5-minute spot and say the mainstream or the plus hall. So basically everybody was doing one singing call, and there were people who walked in, going way back, there were people who walked in with one record. And what happens if the person ahead of you does that record? So always have a choice. And the other thing,
national.
What?
I've done that at a national.
Yeah. The other thing I like to do is if my particular timing allows it, I want to walk in the hall I'm calling at. I have to check in 20 minutes in advance, minimal. I want to stay there. I want to see what they're comfortable with, what they're handling, what the music was used prior to me, because I might want to change if everybody's using country western, I might want to change to something big bandish just so I stand out a little bit. They'll forget all our names. We think we're glorious. They'll forget all our names before the hour's up. But I might want to stand out a little bit.
I absolutely. What you want to stand out for is what you perform and how it's received by the dancers. Betsy, you reminded me, I was at the Canadian Nationals. I was one of the host conveners. I was also the equipment guy, the technical guy, and the spokesperson.
Oh dear.
And as you can imagine, I was running around like a chicken with, my head cut off. And I was supposed to perform. I booked myself an hour off because I was going to be in the one hall, and I had a half-hour slot, which was unusual, at the National Convention. And it was there, and I believe it was Masuwada was right before, I can't remember. I'm a very popular caller from Japan. He was on just before me anyway. Before I got there, I was called away because they had a problem in one of the halls downstairs. I had to change the equipment. I had to change the speakers, everything else. He finished up. I did not get a chance to hear what he had called. And the caller that was a few dances before picked up the program of what was written on the sheet and took it with all his notes. So I got there to a blank stage. So I said, okay, well, I didn't know what was going. So I put on the padded record, and then I did the song Swanee. And it's a beautiful song. It's a nice pickup. Everybody was laughing. I thought I did a great job. He came up and shook my hand and says, wow, you did that really, really well. How did you do that? And I thought, oh, great. This is a known caller. Jerry Junk came up to me afterwards and says, he just called that immediately before you, don't you? And I felt so bad. And I went up and I apologized and I explained what happened. He says, no. And I was supposed to do the next tip. Then we had another thing. So I turned the rest of the program over to Jerry and this other caller because I had to go and fix another hall. But it was one of those things. But until it was, I think, day 3, moving around, bouncing from hall to hall, fixing these problems, that's what I was known for, was the guy that very rudely did the same singing call as another caller. This is one of the reasons why programming is so important. Even, we both did a good job, but it's just something that is considered rude. And this programming at conventions is very different than programming your evening. And unfortunately, as I said right at the beginning, programming at conventions is very, very difficult because it's hampered by 3 things. Ego, that's the ego of the callers and the egos of the programmers. It's hampered by a lack of courtesy, and it's hampered by a lack of common sense because the focus tends to be on the callers and the conveners rather than giving the dancers a good time. And for me personally, if I'm at a national convention, I'd rather say, right, if they're running behind and somebody's doing that, and I've got somebody like Daryl or Barry or Tony or anybody like that following me, and we're well behind schedule, I'll withdraw myself from the program. Because it's not about me, it's about the dancers, because I know they'll get back on track. They can have that extra minute because they'll do a much better performance than I can ever do to give those dancers a good time. As long as you maintain that, that's great. And it's worked for me in the past. I've been doing this now for 40 years. And, keep the goal. And the goal is always dancers, happy dancers. But like I said, it's hard to argue with that. And it's hard to argue with guys that have had enormous success taking that kind of philosophy. I got that philosophy trained into me when I started in Europe. Guys like Al Stevens and Dave Prescott and Jim Harrington and all those, Bob Moffat, it's all about the dancers. And it was like written on a stick. They beat you with it. It's all about the dancers. You start calling for yourself, they walk up and hit you with a stick. They didn't, but that's what it felt like because you knew. Any other comments, questions, queries, points? Yes, Michael. Sorry, Mickey, I should say.
Okay. Here we go. True story. I was at a dance with Kenny Reese, and I was just there for dancing. And he was calling, another caller there on stage. He was very nervous, and the dance went so la la for him. And then he missed his key square, and he crossed the dancers and didn't get them back home or whatever. He was getting nervous. And he had one tip. It was really for the trash bin, right? And so Kenny walked up, and the next tip he did, he built the same mistakes in there. And when he was about halfway through, he said, Mickey, you got to think about your choreo. So I wasn't even involved or whatever, but kind of took the load away from the other one. And afterwards, Kenny came down and said, I hope you don't mind. I said, no, but why did you do it? So because I didn't, all the way follow the first tip when the other guy really messed up bad. And he explained, and from then on, it took a little bit load away from him. Now, a couple of years later, we had a dance with 3 callers, and one had as you said before, a very bad day. So we were calling, and it was nice, turned out to be nice, but he seemed to have more and more problems getting dancers together and keeping them squared. We got it fixed later then by calling with him then. But the same thing, I remember what Kenny did with me. So I played the same trick on the other call and said, well, I think you got to think about your routines, right? So that took a little bit of load off, but you got to be careful with that. So you got to be good friends all together and make sure that the dancers know it, that you're not picking on each other and being mean, but it was discovered by the dancers as a kind of an entertaining tool. Okay, and so they thought it was funny. It was all planned. And so the weak guy wasn't that weak. It seemed to be the first step for a running gag for the evening. So, but you got to be careful, right?
That's where experience, that's like what I was saying up to Betsy earlier about how she gave a compliment to the dancers, but was actually taking that problem away from the guy that was having a problem, gave him some breathing room and built that confidence up, and showing that's creating a peer platform rather than a we're up here, you're down here platform, which is really, really good. Using anecdotal stuff, when I was calling a dance in the northern United States, I saw probably one of the most horrific things happen on a dance floor between 2 callers. And the caller was a relatively new caller, calling a tip, did his tip, asked the guest caller to come up. The guest caller was a very experienced caller, and he was calling, I can't remember what the movement was now, but let's just say Dixie style and a scoot back, for instance. And he'd made a mistake. And it was a glaring. He said, scoot back, everybody with the right hand. Okay, on your own side, scoot back, everybody right hand. Whatever it was, just something that was in his pattern. And the experienced caller got up and says, okay, what he did there was wrong. Let me explain that to you. And he walked him through a Dixie style with a scoot back in his next tip. And then he formed his whole next tip around correcting that mistake. It was the most horrific thing I have ever seen one caller do to another caller. And mainly because this poor guy had the rest of the evening to call. And where does he go? All the dancers go, oh, what's he going to teach us wrong now? You can correct an error. You can, if you've got experience, you can turn it into something like Mickey was saying, or like Betsy was saying, you make that. But if there is something, and if there's something horrifically wrong, you do that out of earshot and out of visual shot of the dancers. You never do that on the microphone. And especially the way it is. So it's just, these are little things that, that's styling and professionalism that you have to keep in mind. Betsy, you had your hand up, and then John, you had your hand up.
Way back, they have a festival in northern New Jersey called the Mini Festival. It's a one-day festival, and they had 3 callers, a local guy and 2 out of town callers. It may be changed now. It doesn't matter. But the 2 out of town callers were really, really good singers, and they knew it. And I went and I thought, this is going to be great. We're going to get some Dynamite Duets. It was just like something from Annie, Get Your Gun. Any note you can hold, I can hold longer. I ended up dancing, holding my sides because I was laughing so hard at these guys trying to outshine each other, when if they had cooperated, it would have been dynamite. It would have been wonderful. But they had to each show off.
I'm hoping to have Dave Prescott and hopefully Tony gave us a session earlier, but about working with other callers, because there's a lot more to it than just being able to call or having the same record in your record box, so to speak. There's a lot that goes into that. I've noticed that we're 25 minutes. I've got your hand there, Roz. I've got John Anthony in front of you. One of the things I would like to say is there's a lot of things that are coming out. There's a lot of us that are teaching and mentoring new callers. Barry's here. The February issue of Behind the Mic magazine is out. I'm not sure if it's up on the website yet, but it is out. So if you are subscribing to it, is it up on the website? Okay, so if it's up on the website, I'll try and get the link posted in the Newbie Callers Facebook pages as well. But there's also an ad that, and I take full responsibility for this in the formatting I missed. It's called the Teaching Institute, which is a caller school for teachers to do the teaching. And all about teaching. It's being run by Ted Lizotte, Tony Oxendine. If you're in that area, by all means, have a look at it, because it is a dynamite opportunity. And it's all about, it's focused on those aspects of teaching rather than on moving dancers around and whatnot. So if you get that opportunity, I said I would mention it here because I forgot to check to see if it came out in the formatting. My fault entirely. If
What
you're
area?
interested, sorry?
What area?
I'm actually trying to look for the flyer while I'm doing this. I was just saying I had it open, but it seems to have
I think it's in Memphis because they're going to the studio as well.
Yeah, they are. I was actually just looking for it. No, that's the wrong folder. Oh my goodness gracious. I had it open here in front of me. I was going to share it on the screen, but here at Magi Square. News article newsletter 2022.
I can't find it at the moment either. I'm having a look. I know you sent it to me saying that we missed it, but I can't find it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in Nashville.
I've got the flyer here. I just got to figure out how to share my
On Nashville, yeah.
There we are. Okay. Oh, sorry. That's the wrong one. This is the Teaching Institute, Bill Harrison.
That's close.
And that's coming up in September.
California.
No, this. Where is this one at? Come on. Okay, that's in conjunction with the Central Sierra Caller School, and then the other one is. Come on, where is it? This is the one I forgot to put in the magazine.
This one's in California.
Yeah, the other one is with Tony and Ted, which is. Come on.
The other one's up in Maine in October.
Now that's a Northeast Color School. But that's not it.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Or I'm sorry, it's in Massachusetts. That's the wrong end.
It is most embarrassing because I had this open here.
So it looks like the two schools have joined together to do an East Coast and a West Coast presentation. Is that what I'm hearing?
I don't know if it's joined together to do an East and West, but they are very complementary.
The two lines at the top kind of seem to.
There we go. And this is the other one. This is the one with Tony and Ted. This is more about performance, studio time, heavy on music, and creative choreography, showmanship, and whatnot. It falls in line. It's a caller school. It's running with the dance in Nashville.
Yeah, it's on May 20th up to Tuesday 24th.
Yeah, you're
I've got-
not sharing it on your screen.
Oh, sorry. I thought I was sharing it. Share screen, screen 2. There we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so this is the one with Tony and Ted, an excellent opportunity. And there's lots, if you do get to behind the mic, there's lots of advertisements at the end that talk about callers' resources. And there's links to record who's doing what, the different labels, the links, schools that are coming up, all of those other kind of things. And Barry does an awful lot of work behind the scenes to get this out every month. I do want to put this, I know it's a shameful plug, but I am absolutely shameless on this because I believe that Behind the Mic, as well as many of these other caller resources magazines, they are out there, they are free. Barry created a song called well, he didn't create the song, but he worked behind the scenes with a lot of production, put a lot of time and effort, and his own time and effort, and a lot of his own funding and everything else to do a record called the Skyboat Song, which there's a link to that in Behind the Mic magazine. It's a great song. It's a lot of fun to do. It's very well recognized. Grab it because all proceeds from that song go into funding Behind the Mic. He's been doing this on his own shoulders for a long time. A lot of things are getting out of date. We need to update all that kind of machinery. And in that same line, David Cox, some of you might know David Cox, others don't. Fantastic choreographer. He's got a mind like a steel trap. He's also, and he does a lot. I believe he owned 4 Bar C, was it?
No, he used to. He sold it to Tracy Brown now.
Yeah, and records creator, recording artist, producer. He's also done another one, and other than the production costs, all the profits from that song go to fund Behind the Mic magazine, because it is not cheap to put these out month after month to do what, even though it's all electronic, it is an awful lot of work. There's a lot that goes on in the background. So if you're able to help out and pass on to other callers these resources, get it to them. I said I wasn't going to do shameless advertisement, but in this case, I'm going to make an absolute exception. The caller schools are there. This is the one for Music City, the Spectacular with Tony and Ted. And of course, I've just closed the other one. How did I manage to do that? There's the other one. And this is the Teaching Institute in September. So if you're in the area anywhere for these schools, there we are. Okay, so this is one in Oakdale in California. Go. You cannot help but have a good time, but also this one in particular, if you're in California, teaching strategies, how to keep the classes, all those things that go into teaching square dancing as opposed to how to call square dancing. And that is probably one of the more importanter sides of calling that really needs to be looked at by a lot of callers these days. So
yeah, I've been up to Ken's school 3 times. My 4th one, I had an accident, so I couldn't get up there. I haven't been back since, but I'm going back. There's great schools, and there's, like you said, the Northeast school was in October this year. It's always in October, and it's a great time. And when you go up there, it's a lot of fun. It's not a thing of sitting there and listening to a teacher teaching and teaching and teaching. You get up there, you get up, you call. They have people come in to dance, to do the dancing for you, so the callers can pay attention to the one that's on the stage rather than being the dancer. So it's really a great thing that Ken puts the way he organizes it.
I really strongly encourage all callers, whether you're brand new or you're an experienced caller, whether or not you've taught caller schools, if there is the opportunity to attend a caller school or a workshop, just to sit in and learn something, you will always come away refreshed with a different point of view. It's great watching new callers discover things for the first time that might be old hat to you. Watching those light bulbs come on gives you a refreshing look at why this activity is as fun as it is, why we do what we do, and you cannot help but come away refreshed. Caller schools that I very, very strongly recommend are the ones that Ken does, because he brings in callers from everywhere. He's got one in Sturbridge. I think he was running 5 different schools. That includes the international, but I think he's down to 3 now. but it's part of the same series, and he travels all over the country, east and west, to do that. The Teaching Institute, I highly, highly recommend that one. Jeff Priest, he runs the Canadian College School, and that travels around from place to place. And are you guys still doing the, you used to do it down in the Bowden Sea, but I'm not sure where you're doing it at ECTA, the ECTA College School, which was a week long. Nikki?
Pardon, did you get to me?
Yeah, I was just saying, do you guys still do, you used to run an ECTA College School, which is a week long down in the Bowden Sea. I'm not sure if it's still done anymore, but.
No, we have the ECTA convention, but ECTA College School is not there. We have a whole bunch of college schools in Germany with Guido and Edeltraud. They're running one up north. I know Cromer is doing one down south. We have the Bavarian College School. I've got that running in Munich. There's some college training in the Frankfurt area as well. So, but ECTA itself has the convention and the regional groups, like the College Treff Süd or the North, regional North in Hamburg. So there are different regional groups for ECTA. They're having part-time trainings.
Yeah, and I know, like here in Australia, one of the best schools that I've heard of was actually the one that was run by Barry. And I am still trying to get him to restart it, but there's, like I said, a lot of things going. We had hoped to have a college school with the National Convention, was in the Blue Mountains, but because of fire, floods, and everything else that was going on and COVID, that got canceled. So it's going to take some arm turning and twisting to kick him, but I don't know what's going to happen with all of these kinds of things. But like I said, if there is a college school in your area, don't just look at the fact that, oh, is that a Collar Lab accredited coach? Because there are a lot of callers out there that are not Collar Lab accredited coaches that portray information very well. We had a couple of callers here. Matthew Mills was here, excellent caller. He's run a number of different college schools. He's not a Collar Lab accredited coach. Here in Australia, we've got one Collar Lab accredited coach. That was Steve Turner, or that is Steve Turner. I was asked to sit that in the Blue Mountains when we were going to do the convention. Unfortunately, I couldn't meet the calling criteria to maintain it. So I'd have to do that every year. And I could not afford to do that every year to maintain the certification or the accreditation. But I've done a number of caller schools here. I've done a number of caller schools over in North America. And if there is one in your area, go. One, support the callers. Support the people doing the school, but two, you will be absolutely amazed at how much information that you can get out of these schools. Even if you don't learn anything new, you'll learn a different perspective and a different way of looking at what you already know. And that in itself is more than worth it. So my two shameless plugs, have a look at BTM. I'll be posting that online as soon as I can. But the Skyboat song, and I can't remember the name of the song that David Cox did, but if you're able to and you like them, and even if you don't and you want to just contribute, it's like an $8 contribution, but all the proceeds go to supporting these things to keep these callers note services and resources alive for everybody. They're not cheap to produce. And even though they're online, people think, oh, it's online, just clicking a button. It's not that easy. And for any of you that have ever done note services, believe me, you know what I'm talking about. John, you had a question earlier, John Anthony. Sorry, I digressed a fair bit. I tend to do that. And then we'll just open the floor up.
I was going to say, when they were talking about the squares breaking down, and we used to go up there and go, you know, we're up here calling, but we're only making suggestions. You only follow us. If you don't want to do your own call, go ahead.
Anybody else have any?
You know, and it takes the tension off of them. And then they get back, they square it back up, and away you go.
Yes, Ross.
Hey, just coming back to before, I had to do a guest tip one time, and I'd practiced all week, and one of my mentors actually did the same song a few brackets beforehand. So I went up and spoke to him. I said, what do I do? And he said, you can do the same song. That's all right. And I thought, well, it's not really right. So I just picked one that I knew really well and learnt the lesson that when I go, not have one song, have 3 at least planned just in case. And the other thing is we had new learners Friday night, which was good. We had some new people on the floor and I wanted to try and teach from scratch. So I shared the night with John Casey and I did the first 2 teachers and queried where I went wrong, and John pointed out a few things. But what he did, exactly what you said, he didn't do it in front of people. He spoke to me about it. And when he did the teach, because he did the next 2 teachers, where I went wrong, he actually called how I should have done it. So I could actually watch him and see where I went wrong. And I thought that was really good. So thank you, John.
Did you tell her what you did right, John?
She actually did a very good job. There was only one small error, and was because it was a lot of
Not worried
callers.
about the errors. Not worried about the errors at all. My big point, if you remember back, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but if you remember back, critique and criticism are 2 completely different machines. Critique has positive with an accentuate the positive, and here's one little thing to improve on, or something, if it's very serious, it may need to be improved on. Critique is you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. And for too long, we have been into criticism rather than critique. Critique builds callers up. And I know you would have done that anyway, because I know you, and I know Roz would have told me otherwise if you didn't.
What I explained to Roz was that a lot of the problems with teaching is you tend to teach the way you were taught. And this is one of the little holes that she fell into, because she was taught that way. She taught it that way. And so I explained to her what was the right way to do it. And of course, I wasn't going to call exactly the same thing. So I did it in a different way. Every dancer learns from a particular way something is said, and every caller says it in a different way. What some people pick up from one, they might, another person might pick it up from another, because you've got to teach it 2 different ways.
Best advice I ever got was from my grandfather when I was about 4 years old. They were teaching me to play Scrabble. We had to use the words. I could use a dictionary, but any word I used, I had to be able to use in a sentence. And that progressed into any time I wanted to say something, I have to be able to explain it 4 different ways to get the same meaning across. Square dance calling is harder than that, but the principle remains the same. Find different ways to say the same thing. Roz, I had a question about what you said. When you were asked to do a tip, how much advance notice did you get?
Well, I knew a few weeks beforehand that I would. Yeah.
Okay. So, and this is what I was saying on the night. If you do get advance notice, remember what I was saying in the session, ask questions. Part of that is communication, but part of it is also doing, I'd like to do, this song or this song or this song, giving a list, and that would tend to avoid that. Roz, I know you've got at least a dozen go-to songs by now. I think at least 4 or 5 that you can do that, and that's kind of like what Daryl Clendenin, I don't know if Daryl's still here or not, but what Daryl was saying earlier, have a tip prepared, which is a go-to tip, but have a few singing calls I would add on that you can do, because you can always, patter calls are patter calls. But if you've got a couple singing calls and a couple go-to singing call figures, you can pretty much get through anything to call a guest tip. And the idea is to give a performance that is solid, is comfortable, makes the dancers happy, enhances their evening, that hopefully says, you know what, that person's doing pretty good. Might ask them to come back. And that's the goal of this. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, when I first started, I made a mistake. I had the set started to call to learners, and they broke down. And I said, firstly, go home, go back with your wife. And this guy kept walking off the floor. He wasn't dancing with his wife. I should have said partner.
Yep.
And that's where he went.
Pause. Go back home to your wife. Yeah, okay. Am I taking that just as an insult? Oh, well, gee, it doesn't like my dancing. Okay, fine, I'll go home. We had comments that were coming across last week. We had Corey Geis on here, and he was, or sorry, not last week, the week before, talking about if it can go wrong, it will go wrong. Murphy's Law in calling. And it was very, very iconic and very ironic that right after his presentation, we opened up for discussion and his internet went out and he tried to get back in 3 or 4 times. He did send a big thank you to everybody for communicating and everything else, but it just goes to show you that anything that can go wrong, if you got an idea, prepare for the power to go out, prepare for your music to crash, prepare for A, B, C, and D. And chances are, if you program all these things and then plan and prepare ahead of time, you're going to give a good performance. It may not be your best, but it'll be good, and your dancers will not know the difference. They'll enjoy themselves dancing. Yes, Mickey.
Yeah, I wanted to say prepare for the unexpected as well, Ryan, but you said it now and remembered me of 2 occasions I had. I was calling about maybe 5 years and had a special dance calling with L. Stevens together. And I was calling, and while calling, he looked at me and said, "You're okay?" And I said, "Yeah, but I lost my watching square." And somehow he knew that it wouldn't help me if he would say, you know, you're in a corner line or whatever the nomenclature was at that time. But he said, just call exactly what I call. And I trusted him. So he called in my ear, and I just called and called and called, and they were there. So that was fine. It was, you know, just plain vanilla. It was nothing worse, but it helped. It took the nervous a little bit away from me. So a couple of years later, I was calling a big student dance with a very experienced caller or two. And he was calling, and we were sharing the tip. And I said, after a while, I said, do you need help? And he said, yeah, I lost my watching square. And then I said, well, just call exactly what I'm calling. And dancers couldn't tell because I was really standing in the way and whispering in his ear and looking half towards him and half towards the dancers. And so I started calling and calling and calling. And then I thought, you know, let's give him something special, okay? And then I was calling, said, and then you're home. And if he just would have said that word, it would have been fine. But he turned around and said, really? So, and then after the tip, we went down and said, how could you tell that I was lost? And I said, I think you were about fishing for 10 calls. And it was just looking for how to get people and dancers together and whatever. And then he said, well, it was not 10 calls, it was 15 calls. So it's, and
after a while watching it, it becomes very, very apparent because the tempo of the dance and the smoothness of the dance changes. Even if it's a little bit, it does become noticeable because it's such a big difference. I liken it to watching soldiers on parade. You don't watch the person that's marching out of step. You watch everybody else, they're all in sequence. What the person that's out of step stands out at you because it's different. And when somebody's calling and there's a slight change in that calling technique or what you're used to, it stands out to somebody that knows what to look for.
He asked them, did the dancers realize that? Well, they would not have if you would not have said, really? So, but this is a fun thing. And then we all laughed, and it turned out to be a real nice evening, and he was relaxed and whatever. But that always can happen, that you lose your watching square or you miss something in your module or whatever. So, and we're all human, right?
And I'm lucky that me losing my pilot square only happens to me on days that end with the letter Y. So that I'm pretty good that way. But I saw one similar to that where the caller was helping, and he such a big habit walking up to the stage, you're sharing, picking up a mic. But he put, because he was going to cue a round dance afterwards, he put on his remote headset because he was going to cue from the floor and forgot it was turned on.
Uh-oh.
And he said, okay, yeah, just call this. And you could hear it coming through the mic, but he couldn't hear it coming through the mic for some reason because he had the headset on. So he was broadcasting, and And that's what you get, square through, right and left, right and left through. And that's what you could hear. Everybody thought it was a setup and it was funny, but it was quite embarrassing. Betsy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, talking about your eye is drawn to the one who's out of step. I don't watch my watching square when I just call, and when I want to resolve, I go back to them and see if I can pair them up or if they've done something exciting. But I'm looking at the whole floor, and that's how I can perhaps fix a square that's towards the back of the room, because my eye is drawn when they have a little problem and everybody else is moving in synchronization. And this one square is out of sync with them. And so I can say, okay, we need to have two face lines for the girls in the middle and help them to get right back in, because I saw the thing happen. I saw the problem happen.
That's one thing that happens most often with inexperienced callers and experienced callers. You can really see the difference when they start calling. They even the most experienced callers, a lot of them will actually make a note or make a jot down of their pilot square, especially if they're a hall they're not in, and they'll start calling. They'll look at their pilot still, as everybody, and call an opener, looking at everybody, and call their first setup, a little bit of focus on their pilots. Yeah, they're good. And then they're drawn away, and they're constantly scanning the floor just to make sure that everything's moving in sync. They're like, I don't know if anybody remembers the old Battlestar Galactica, the TV show, that eyeball going back and forth. That's all it's doing, is scanning the floor. When something's different, that's comes with experience.
Yes.
And when you're there, you can call. It's also something that goes to building rapport with an entire floor, because you can communicate to one individual person on the floor. And sometimes once you develop the habit, it could be like me. I could have a conversation with Guido on the floor while I'm calling a dance, and we could be talking back and forth, and nobody even knows that we're having a conversation until they realize, wait a minute, he's talking about the brownies that Iltraud made the other day, that cake mix. What the heck's that guy? And people will realize that, and they're suddenly all drawn into the conversation. The choreography becomes a little less dynamic, because they're all drawn into this conversation about Edeltraud's cooking, and it's there are some callers that are absolute masters at this. Don Beck was one of those. He would have entire conversations with dancers on the floor while he was calling, and half the time you're more focused on the conversation that's going on. You're doing the dance, and it's good dancing, but you're more focused on that conversation because it's hilarious, and you draw them in. Callers that can master that are geniuses, in my opinion. Yes, Guido.
When I was a rather unexperienced caller, so somewhere around 1997 or so.
I thought you were going to say a couple of weeks ago.
I did have a visitor in my club in Bern, Dave Vieira from Texas.
Oh yeah.
And then I noticed the difference between an experienced caller and an inexperienced caller. I make it a little extreme. I was having problems to keep my thoughts away from the square while watching them doing a grand square. And Dave was able to hold a conversation during a slide through and still call. So this is something where I learned that experience is something you need to have. And then you get, also, you can get into a state of peace of mind. You have free time in your brain to do something else, to relax and not be concentrated in decision making anytime or all the time. This was something that was very, very informative for me. I learned a lot that night. And another point, you always see the side caller, especially the inexperienced side caller on the stage, because the side caller does not see anything else but his pilot square.
I would disagree with that.
No, I said the inexperienced.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, those who start to call and say, I'm a side caller. They see nothing but their pilot square on the floor. There could be 50 squares, but they just see that one square. They don't even recognize when of those other 50 squares, 48 are broken down.
Somebody was telling me a story the other day. They did it blindfolding the caller and sight caller, but you do it with the blindfold. It's a gimmick that a lot of happens a lot during a lot of the German dances and graduation dances and things like that. And they set him up. The lights were out. The blindfold was on, and all the dancers left the hall except for a few that were just shuffling their feet. Anecdotally, and it's pure anecdotally, is they did this to one caller who was an experienced caller, but he was one that was known for, hi, how's everybody doing? And, move the dancers around. And then it was, boom. And that's where he would call it, and almost in this position, pulled in, focused absolutely on that square. And they set up a pilot square, which was an obvious setup with the matching colors, good dancers and everything else, so that this person could do it. And all the other squares would move back, and they all left the hall while he was calling in the hall, and he didn't notice. Now that's anecdotal. If anybody has any veracity, but that's just a story I was told. It was like 3 or 4 other squares left the hall just to show this guy that you got to look at the whole hall. And it was a bit of a joke. It was a bit of humor. I don't know if it's true, but it was an anecdotal tale that I've heard a number of times.
Not funny.
No, not funny at all.
No, I had a plus graduation, and they forced me to go behind the curtain and call blind. So I grabbed out some modules and tried to call, and then I wanted to make it something really special. So I started calling, and I was asking the guy standing at the curtain, are they dancing? And he said, yeah, keep on going. And so I did, like ping pong circulate and really moved them over, and they were just wondering that they're still running, and with them relay the doozy and then take one step back and the heads face in and you're home. And did they make it? And then drew back the curtain. They were sitting there on the floor, reading newspaper, knitting, drawing, whatever. They did not do one step. True story at Colors of the Wind.
But they made you, that's kind of what happened to me, because they blindfolded and said, okay, so, and just call. And I did immediately, and I had expected it. So I had worked and I had practiced out an entire routine in my head with modules and sequences and everything else. I was actually ready for it because I was expecting it. What I wasn't expecting was exactly that.
Yeah.
How they did it, I have no idea, but they had actually, there's this, they're making the noise, they're wrapping my eyes up. There's enough music and everything on stage, and I'm calling, and I was really working. I was a new caller and really, really proud of myself. And I was
so proud, right?
Did you do it? Yay! Okay. And then they took the blindfold off, and what they'd done is cleared the hall and actually set it up for lunch. I had no idea. Nobody was dancing. They were setting tables up and putting food out and everything else, but they were doing it very quietly. And there's a lot of those things that happen in Europe, where they used to. I don't know if they still do, but it was part of the fun of it.
No matter how kind your dancers are, they can be beasts.
Oh yeah.
No, it was cool. Yeah.
But don't take revenge.
Yeah, the best one is one of the things that happened in Europe was they'd always strip the collar down. It's like a pajama party, and everybody's to wear sleepwear, and it's supposed to be demure and everything else. And one caller wanted to prove the point and said, but I sleep naked. And he waited till they took the shirt off and started to advance. He said, oh, by the way, I sleep naked. And that stopped there, but that came out loud enough on the mic that nothing happened, but it was just, I sleep naked, by the way. They had to strip the guy down and nowhere to go.
I had a friend one time, back when I think it was when you woke the caller up, you got I think it was the idiot badge. You woke the caller up in the middle of the night, and they had to come and call, and they were supposed to be, everybody was in their pajamas or whatever. Well, he had been sleeping naked in a sleeping bag. So they're trying to take the sleeping bag down, and he's clutching the sleeping bag madly with one hand while he clutched the microphone with the other. And he was young, so he didn't really have the nerve to tell him he slept naked.
Something that happened to me 4 times when I was calling in Germany is they'd show up at the house about 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Get up, and then you drive an hour from Lahr up to Baden to go call a dance at 2 o'clock in the morning at somebody's house. it was just, it's what they did.
There's a reason they called that
Fanatics.
the idiot badge.
They've done it twice to me. Never again. The first time they did it, I called on whatever, 862 and went back to the room. But a half hour later, they knocked on the door and said, "We're done. What now?"
Good on us.
So, 2 years later, the same group came and did the same thing again. And then I called basic dance by definition for a half hour. And they said, "When were we done? When are we done?" And said, "Now you woke me up. Now we're going through the morning light." They never do that again. No singing call, no nothing, just the hoedown. Yeah.
Anyway, on my presentation today, the big messages are plan, prepare, and practice. If you can do those three things, chances are you're going to have a good delivery, because the fourth P is performance. And all of those go into programming. Plan, prepare, practice, and then you can perform it. And when you practice both the patter and the singing call together as a tip, the patter and your alternate singing call together as a tip, and then you practice them all separately. Get used to it. If you need modules or you need something written down, prepare it beforehand, have it there, and use it with your practicing. Call, mixing, and matching in your practice. The reason for it is it's too easy to say, well, it's there on the screen. Use it, practice, get used to looking at it, and always use, if you can, the same layout, the same format, so that no matter where you go, you're going to be looking in the same place for what you need for every tip. I cannot stress it enough. There are so many experienced callers out here that have such good advice. What I gave you today, and Mark will have that in the notes, is the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, but also in there, because it's in a Word document, is that little template I had for a 2.5 hour dance. As I said, I like a 4-minute patter. I do not like a 6, 7, or 8 minute patter. I never have, because it makes the dancers too tired. After the break, too many dancers are going home. While they're going home, I found that when I do a 4-minute patter, most of the dancers that used to go home after a 6-minute patter after the break stayed, because they weren't tired. They get more dancing, but they also get more rest, and they get more social interaction, which is why they stayed. They got more social interaction. And you do not, despite what people say, you do not generally socially interact while you're dancing. You interact with other dancers, but you don't socialize with other dancers while you're dancing, because you're too busy doing other things. Give the dancers time. That works for me. If what works for you and what works for you in your club is what you should be focused on, what keeps your dancers happy. Very, very good to see everybody here this week. Thank you very much for all your participation. Betsy, I'm still waiting for your program.
There are about 3 things ahead of you.
I know, Caller Lab being one of them, more than likely.
Yeah.
I was talking with Yolanda and a couple of others earlier. One of the things I would love to have is a presentation on women in calling, not just women in calling, but how women look at calling differently than how men look at calling. I know you look at both sides of the equation when you call, because looking at calling as a man was what was pretty much forced upon you when you started, and you've developed away from that. But it's one of the things that I would love to have, especially for male callers, not to learn that system, but be aware that, hey, if you're going to mentor, you have to start thinking slightly differently. I found it very hard when I was coaching and mentoring with Yolanda to change my own perspective, to get the right words in to how she was looking at it, because how I explained it made no sense to her. And I'm still a long way from being there. I will fully admit that I'm still a long way from being there all the time, right? It is one of the presentations that I would love to have you give, or with Yolanda. I've been telling Yolanda and a few others to get a hold of you and get that going. Deborah Carroll Jones, for those of you that are going to Caller Lab, Deborah's giving a presentation on building rapport through the microphone. Is the best way I can sell it, is developing that relationship with your dancers through the microphone, how you do that. And I think that is I would love to have that presentation here as well, because I know not everybody here is going to be able to go to Caller Lab, and not everybody here will be tuning in
Right.
I don't even know if they're going to have it live on Zoom or not, but not everybody will be tuning in and not everybody will be downloading all the sessions or paying for all the sessions either.
And one other thing, if somebody is planning on going to Caller Lab this year, prior to Caller Lab, Deborah Carroll Jones, Betsy Gata, Jeanette Stoible, wait a minute, Shara, Chic Records. Where there's a female caller school for female callers run by female callers.
Yep.
So if anybody happens to be planning on going to Caller Lab, it's on the East Coast. So I expect a lot of people right here are not going to make it, but there is the Women in Calling Institute prior to Caller Lab.
And there's a couple of things in those sessions that, and I know you're going to be there, correct, Betsy?
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, blatant plug, but when you see Debbie and the rest of them, let them know that I'm definitely would like to have a couple of those presentations given here. They can expand a little bit, because I know at Caller Lab, when you get onto it, you've got this 45-minute slot, but it is
and 3 or 4
presenters. Sorry?
The 45 minutes slot and 3 or 4 presenters, or 2 or 3 presenters.
Yeah, three presenters, 45 minutes, and probably about 3 weeks worth of information.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I have to go. I have a hungry husband.
Take care, Betsy.
Mel?
Nikki, you had a
Bye,
question?
Betsy.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Just so you may save yourself to correct it, because this has been recorded. I once heard and was told never